I'm glad you mentioned what seems to be the one key data point that Mr. Powell is focusing on, and it's core PCE x housing, or this idea of inflation minus housing. So people will hear that. Give me your sense on what that actually means. Are you stripping away food, energy, and shelter and housing, and why is that, you think, so important to the FOMC?
So as he explained last week when he was at the Economic Club of Washington, we are seeing some, deflation, if you will, in manufactured goods. That's great. Supply chains are easing up, but we still have a very tight labor market, and services inflation, that's the key part, is still not really coming down. So there's when we get the PMI data, right? There's really two parts that we get every month. There's the manufacturing economy, services economy. That's the one that he's really focused in on here. And we just haven't seen those numbers really start to tick down the way it has on the manufacturing side. So it just tells you that this is going to take longer. But when you think about the January employment report that showed the unemployment rate tick down, and then we take a look at the NFIB Small Business Optimism Index that came out yesterday, I believe 46% of respondents said, hey man, I can't find the people I'm looking for. Very tight labor market. So it tells us that there's continue to be wage inflation, that services component, that's going to be a tougher nut to crack.
Is the path to a soft landing narrowing, or is it becoming more likely, you suspect?
That's a great question. And if the Fed has to go even harder, right, it's really a tough question to ask, because what we're seeing is the Fed is going to have to do more. The question is how much more, and I think we're going to need more data to get that. The flip side of it, though, is if we don't have a recession, right, which the Fed was kind of saying there might be some pain to help get to our 2% target, if we don't see that emerge, it's reason to think that the Fed, again, will have to do more. So it's leaning, in my opinion, more towards we could have a softer landing, but not sure yet.
Do you suspect that the most recent, either the Fed decision we got not long ago or the rhetoric from Jay Powell would have been at all different had it been after the jobs day or after some of the data points we've gotten even the last few days?
Well, Powell spoke after the jobs report, right, last week at the Economic Club.
A different. I was referring specifically to the press conference on Fed
Day.
Right.
And
the decision.
So if we were to time machine back and the calendar was a little different, I think we would have seen a much more hawkish Powell.
Wow.
No question about it.
Okay. In terms of the point increase or rhetoric or both?
I think it would have been the rhetoric.
The rhetoric, yeah, exactly. Because we always parse through those words.
Well, you have to. You got to break out the Dick Tracy decoder ring and go after him.
We truly go. I mean, we go word for word. We try and determine what did he say last time.
Correct.
And what words did he change? Now he says ongoing. Now he says disinflation, and we start to get really excited. Your calculus for the terminal? What are we looking at? 5 to a quarter,
so
more than that?
Yeah, so it's constantly evolving based on the data we get, right? So right now the CME Fed Watch tool is now up to 5 1/4 to 550 by the June meeting. Previously it was topping out, just a little bit less. So the calculus has changed in the sense that now there's the growing expectation for a June rate hike of another 25 basis points. Tomorrow is the January Producer Price Index. We'll want to watch those probabilities and see what happens. But I'm suspecting that that's going to be increasingly on the table. Again, that June rate hike.
You have not been in the camp of rate cuts in 2023, have you?
No. And I say that for two reasons. One, I listen to the data, right? Yeah. And then the second one is the Fed has already told us this umpteen times.
Right.
Not going to happen. Not going to happen.
There you go. Yes, perfect. Listen, I told Chris, if you ever want to drive anything home, you go right to your ISO camera and you let the folks know. So does it, then what are your, because you watch more business news than anyone. I mean, you're
presumably, yes.
But you see, everyone's like, oh, we're in for rate cuts, folks. Watch out. End of the year, we're scaling back.
Well,
the pivot.
Here's the crazy thing, okay? So, and I have to hat tip Bob Lang for this, because he's the one who originally pointed this out to me. If you look at the CME Fed Watch tool, it still has a rate cut in December, right? But instead of going from 525 to 550 down below 5% where it was previously, it now says, 500 to 525, which is 50 basis points higher than we are today.
Right.
So it's still going to be a tighter environment no matter what.
Sure. I do want to ask you, while we're on the topic of the Fed, Lael Brainerd leaving, White House, NEC role. The timing is interesting
Yes, it is.
Especially given that the Fed is such an incredibly it's potent and important institution right now. And we are seeing, is Brian Deese, I believe is the gentleman's name, who is leaving the role at the White House. Your thoughts and what should our viewers know as they see those headlines and may not even know much about Lael Brainerd herself in terms of her place in the committee?
Yeah, so she's the vice chair, so the effective number 2, right? So of course she's going to have a strong voice, in the Fed during the FOMC meetings, but she's also reportedly one of the more dovish folks inside the FOMC. So you look at the data that we were just talking about, you look at her leaving around February 20th, just about a month before the next FOMC meeting, we could see a more hawkish tilt emerge from the Fed.
And the timing then again is like very interesting. And I know what the outgoing NEC rep has said. He said in part this is time to spend more of an opportunity to spend time with his family. The natural progressions kind of come and go.
So hang on.
Politically for the White House, you're dealing now with a new look Congress. Things are you're going much more uphill.
So let me just flip the script here real quick.
Sure.
So I know in a past life you covered Washington and the White House. When you hear that excuse, what does that really tell you?
I never discount what could be a good faith family moment for someone because I can't say that's wrong.
Right? No, 100%. Which is why you say it.
But the timing is also worth noting. That yes, now Kevin McCarthy is Speaker. Republicans are going to make things a lot more difficult on the White House. And perhaps you fought the good fight. You haven't slept in 2 years, and you're like, yeah, now there's a good exit point.
I'm so glad you said that because for a minute I thought I was the only cynic here.
Oh no, I'm plenty cynic. Oh, listen, you don't live in Washington without developing your cynicism skin overnight. Your first time there, you become incredibly jaded. All right, let's talk retail sales, shall we?
Do it.
What jumps out to you from the numbers here? What do you think investors should be looking to as we try and find some steady footing in today's session?
So two big observations, right? First was the restaurant number. Holy cow.
Oh, yeah.
Up 25%, 25.2% year over year. Clearly people are eating out, shrugging off higher prices. No question about it. The second one though, and this is a little compare contrast, was that non-store retail sales were only up 3% in the month. So non-store sales for the viewer, that's shopping online, digital shopping, Amazon, that sort of thing, only up 3%. But if you look at department stores, clothing sales, all of that was really strong in January, far stronger than we saw in November, December. So we put our little detective hat on. That tells us, wow, we know brick and mortar retailers had a lot of excess inventory. Most likely, they drew people in with all these sales and discounts to kind of clear it out. However, we also heard from Capri Holdings, VF Corp, and some others that inventories, I think Under Armour too, that inventories exiting December were still very high. So there might be more to go on that. So a lot of discounting, got to watch margins at these retailers.
Okay, so talk to us about what that process looks like. You watch margins for the retailers since given your role with the portfolio overall, if someone watching wants to learn more about what that means, I'd like to become educated in learning some of that or knowing where to look.
Sure. So let me first preface it by saying this, that inside the Action Alerts Plus portfolio, we have no brick and mortar retailers other than Costco. Because Costco, in our opinion, continues to expand its footprint, which is great for the business. Its warehouse business model is very different compared to most retailers, subscription component or membership component. And the third is they really help consumers, stretch their spending dollars. Okay, so Costco's a very different retailer. It's not like Macy's, a lot of apparel and stuff like that. So what did we hear coming into the back half of the year? Consumers were continuing to spend on experiences, travel. We've been seeing all the numbers that speak to that. Airbnb last night, TripAdvisor as well, reconfirming that. So people had not been buying things, clothes, books, that sort of thing. And all of a sudden, bloated inventories, and retailers are like, hey man, I got to get rid of this because I need to refresh, whether it's for the spring season, the summer season, what have you, got a discount. So shoppers, if you look at the data, it appears they leaned right into that, hence the sharp pickup in some of those January numbers compared to December and November. So, and for a lot of that, I would say, I wrote a great note to AAP or Action Alerts Plus members. I would say, listener, check it out.
Check it out. AAP plugs are always welcome on our show. That's the way it should be.
Excellent.
Which we do like to do from time to time. We also talked about $1.80? What's the Costco deal for the dollar for drink and hot dog?
Oh, 150 plus tax.
150. Oh, plus tax to Costco.
Come on.
Come on. Well, of course they have to, and you're a big fan of that. It's iconic. I feel
All I
like.
can say is that I had one last week. Yes, I did.
Yes, you did.
Yes,
Okay,
I
I guess
did.
you got a Costco close
I
by.
did not. And the person I was with got a churro.
God, now we're talking because that's my big. I'm not going to get the hot dog and drink thing.
Yeah, I understand.
But I'm a
You know
fan
how
of
big that
churros.
churro was?
It's
like-
Costco size.
It's huge.
Listen, if you get, it's like Costco is like the Texas of these stores, right?
Gotta
Everything's
go
bigger.
big. Go big or go home.
Absolutely. Before we move on to earnings specifically, any other key data points that you're following? It seems like every day there's something big that's more or less driving markets we should be focused on. What's jumping out to you for?
Yeah, I mean,
Next few days.
the retail sales was the big one. Oh, for the next few days, I would say again the January producer price index. That's for price increases that manufacturers and service providers tend to have. So we'll want to see if that's trending down. That tends to be a leading indicator for the consumer price index. So that's probably the next big one that we'll be watching in the marketplace. And again, we're going to want to digest the reception to it. And while I've been talking about the Fed funds rate, for the most part, I would say you also want to watch the dollar. You also want to watch treasuries. The dollar in particular, because it's if you look at it against the basket of other currencies, it's really come down since early November. And that's a positive for multinational companies. Think your Microsofts, Googles, for example, because it makes them more competitive, right? That dollar headwind is eroding. But now all of a sudden, the dollar is coming back up. Reason thinking is, oh, the Fed funds rate might have to go a little higher. That, in other words, where I'm going with this is that deteriorating headwind looks like it might be coming back a little bit. So we'll have to be on the watch for that.
Wow, we're all on Powell Watch constantly, aren't we?
I think isn't that a cable show? Powell Watch?
Powell Watch?
Yeah.
If it's not, it should be.
It should be.
I think so. Like original production from TheStreet. Powell Watch.
Courtesy of the Federal Reserve.
We
yeah.
just give you a 24-hour, 7 feed of everything you need to know of just the Fed.
Yeah, so we'll see him riding his bike. We'll see him reading detective fiction and some other stuff.
But as he rides his bike, you don't know if he's going to slip in a historical record strongly argues against loosening policy one-liner as he goes around the curve. You never know, but that's what we want to pay attention to.
Correct.
Anyway, just got off the rails. Want to talk earnings?
Sure.
All right, Airbnb. What happened? That's it. All right. Next.
No. People are traveling. It's it
Yeah.
is great. And what I found most interesting is the number of properties they had listed. If you look year over year, I believe it was up like 900,000, something like that. So it tells you that people are looking to monetize, dwellings, right? So perhaps this leans into the narrative that consumers are strapped a little bit and they're turning to Airbnb to help make some extra income.
Absolutely. So in terms of combining with one of your previous answers, if someone were to ask you, hey, where are we really seeing consumers spend money? Whether or not the Fed wants them to, different question.
Travel.
Travel, but also food restaurants.
Well, you
Some
got to eat out
experiences.
when you travel, right? For the most part.
Okay.
For the most part.
Right. Well, especially if you're going to an Airbnb or something like that, you'd have to imagine.
Oh, hey, speaking of travel, I know you went to Disney.
I did go to Disney.
How expensive was it in the park to eat?
High. I mean, it was great question. It was high, but because I live in New York City, nothing feels high.
I understand that.
Whereas most people probably at Magic Kingdom on any given day they don't reside in the 5 boroughs. It reminds me of like when I went to Switzerland. Everyone's like, wow, watch out, it's very expensive. You actually go to Switzerland. If you live in New York, you're like, not that expensive. I'm used to spending $4 to $5 needlessly on the occasional cup of coffee.
Correct.
You do that in Zurich, you do that in Manhattan, you do that in Magic Kingdom.
Got it.
Absolutely. But coffee was cheaper in Magic Kingdom than it was where I live in Queens, for whatever that's worth.
Interesting.
Had a great time, and I was there on earnings day too.
Okay, you want to get back to earnings?
Yeah, let's do earnings.
Okay.
What else do we get? Do we get other big companies outside of Airbnb? Oh, later this week. Who else are we following? Other companies. It's already Wednesday, but.
Yeah, so we've got Cisco reporting. We've got Vulcan Materials reporting. Who else do we have? And Deere on Friday.
Oh yeah, Deere. Let's talk Deere.
Deere. Well, let's talk Cisco first.
Oh, yeah,
that's okay.
yeah, for sure.
So last night, this other company that supplies data infrastructure markets, Credo Technologies, reported and slashed their revenue outlook. And it's a little disconcerting. I believe the shares were down significantly in aftermarket, and they're probably getting, technical term here, whacked as we're talking this morning.
It's a technical term, yes.
Yeah. So it kind of jumpstarts that conversation about, weakening data infrastructure spend, cable spending, and potential slowing data center spend. Now, they really fingered it on one particular customer. Speculation is that might be Microsoft, but not sure. But, it does tell us that there's another end market for chips that continues to be, weakening in the near term. We also heard that yesterday from Global Foundries. So what Cisco says tonight should be pretty interesting about that market. We'll also want to be listening to what Cisco has to say about cybersecurity as well.
Oh, yeah, that's a really important note. And then anything specifically for Deer Friday? If not,
No.
I do want to ask you about some of the retail numbers that we'll get in the next couple of weeks.
Sure. So let's tackle Deere. Deere, as we all know, is one of the biggest ag equipment companies out there. There's a massive upgrade cycle that has been unfolding. Right, crop prices continue to remain at elevated levels, great for farmer income. When they report, we'll be looking obviously for a good report as a result of what I just mentioned. But the two things that I'll be looking for will be one, how much more pricing leverage do they have in the tank? In other words, can they continue to raise prices into 2023? The second is, what's the upgrade cycle looking like for precision ag equipment? And the reason you see farmers, potentially leaning into this is that helps offset, that type of equipment, helps offset rising costs for fertilizers and other things.
And then finally, to retail earnings properly, what will you be following? Obviously, we hit retail sales specifically, but we follow a lot of those companies very closely.
No, we do. And, as I said earlier, we don't own any retailers in AAP outside of Costco. That doesn't mean we're not looking at some. We're always, this is the question that we always get, are you considering this? What about that? And the answer is yes, because we're always looking for the best positioned companies for the portfolio to bring those ideas to the members, right? We always want the companies that are going to perform well or better than well, in general, relative to the market over, the coming 12 to 18 months. So that's, we're always looking for those, okay? So will we be looking for some retailers? Yes, we will. Do I think it's going to continue to be a challenging season for them? I do. Getting back to something you almost tried to put a pin in earlier, margins, right? When we see a lot of discounting from retailers, they might have to get aggressive, right? That's what that means. That's going to hit their profitability. So we want to watch their margins, right? They're probably going to be under pressure. Margins are a great lever for the bottom line, so we could potentially see bottom line weakness. We'll also want to be listening to see how far did they work down those bloated inventories. Without seeing those numbers, I would say that the discount retailers, probably your Ross stores, TJ Maxx, those might be the ones who benefit more as larger brick and mortar retailers look to liquidate that excess inventory. And those companies, again, Ross stores, TJ Maxx, can pick it up at far better prices than they would have in any of the last several quarters.
Consumers love the treasure hunt component of TJ Maxx.
They do.
I'm a big Marshall's TJ Maxxinista guy. From time to time when I need to be, of course, but that's part of the appeal. In the stores, the line is always long. People are always in there.
Yeah,
better value.
The thing that throws me, and I have this problem even like at Best Buy, is on the way out, I have a lot of, if I'm buying something and I'm in the checkout line, I have a lot more decisions to make. Do I want this candle? Do I want this candy bar? Do I need another charger?
You mean the checkout line thing? That's where they get you.
Yes.
That's where they get you. Like, do you need those gummy worms while you're shopping at Best Buy? Admit the answer is maybe. No.
Maybe.
Is there any retail company that you have considered adding to the portfolio outside of Costco, of course? Is there one that you like better than others? And if so, are you even allowed to tell us?
Yeah, I can tell you. I mean, look, I just mentioned two that we've been looking at, right? TJX and Ross stores, they both have had great runs. I do think they will do well. The question to wrestle with here is, if you're going to start a fresh position, do you see enough upside given the movement we've seen in the stock prices? Not sure yet.
Okay. Overall takeaways of earnings season so far?
Better than feared, which is something to say.
Sure.
Right? But I was also right. And what I mean by that is back in September, I was very concerned about 2023 earnings expectations for the market, the S&P 500. And I said, I just don't see how those numbers, they were up, I think, a little over 8% in early September in 2023 versus 2022, given everything that we were seeing, right? With the economic data at the time, where interest rates were going, where credit card borrowing was going, all this stuff. And I was just like, I just don't see how those numbers are going to happen. Flash forward to last week, consensus 2023 EPS is now flat with 2022. That's a best case. There are others out there, I think JP Morgan, maybe Goldman Sachs, that see it from around the 220 level in 2022 down as much as 205 to 210 for 2023.
You're spiking the football a little bit. You were right. But what a great plug, though, for AAP specifically, folks. I mean, you're listening to the man who, TheStreet was facing one way, and this guy goes, no, I'm going to swim upstream a little bit. You're right.
Yeah, I'm not so much a spike the ball kind of guy.
You're a Barry Sanders. You score, you hand the ball back to the referee.
No, I'm trying to figure out what little jiggy dance I'm going to do.
Oh, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Travis Kelce did the stanky leg during the Super Bowl. I don't know if you've been trying that out at home. Let me ask you about EVs while I still have you here.
Sure.
We're seeing this issue now. We've had it front and center for a while, but it's obviously something the White House is trying to be more vocal about.
Well, you know this, right? so what did Biden say? The White House
game, of course.
The White House agenda is twofold, right?
Yeah.
500,000 EV chargers in a nationwide network, right? And I believe it's targeting 50% of all autos by 2030 EVs, right? So what did they do? This is what you're going to ask me. What did they come out and say today? So they finally answered some questions about the EV charging network. Yes, they reiterated those numbers I just said, which I think is a positive and probably explains why, looking at the boards, why ChargePoint and others are probably up today. Great for AAP, okay? Because we have a vested interest in one of those names.
Sure.
It also removed an overhang, and I want to make sure I get these numbers right. Originally, the Department of Transportation was saying, hey, roughly 25% of all components need to be sourced domestically by the middle of this year. And that would have been a challenge, no question about it. Instead, what they came out with today and said, 55% by June of 2024. So that's a lot more time for the EV charging companies to figure out their supply chains. I think that's a positive. There's also some other news about what Tesla is doing, which I think is totally overdone. And the reasons for it being done. You want me to tell you what it is?
Well, my next question was the impact on Tesla and GM, but let's combine it into one, yeah.
So let's talk Tesla, okay? So there was some news out this morning. Tesla's going to open up 7,500 of its EV charging stations to everybody.
Right.
Isn't Tesla nice? Right. Yeah. Do you know why Tesla did that? Because they had to do that in order to qualify for some of the EV charging money that is going to be deployed by Washington. So it's not like they're being nice guys. They want the money. Right, so let's just understand that.
I like that.
Okay, all right. And then you had something on.
And GM, the impact on GM, the overall conversation, the White House involvement.
It's not going to be. Or is there something specific you're referring to?
Not.
Oh, you're just talking overall EVs. Yeah. So, well, first off, plug for all the EV companies. Rising tide lifting all boats, right? Because we're going to go to 500,000 just from federal money, but there's other private initiatives as well. I think that's a great space to be in. And again, we have our exposure with AAP with one name in particular. As far as GM goes, it's the same thing, right? Whether it's Ford, Volkswagen, Stellantis, Honda. Again, rising tide towards EVs, and I think that's going to be good news for all of them that are leaning into it effectively. There's some that are not.
Right.
What I really want to see on this whole front is what is the adoption of EVs now that we have the EV tax credit?
Right.
That started in January, and it's been expanded, the definition recently, to include a wider range of vehicles in terms of price points. So that's a positive. But we're not really going to know how many people are leaning into that and using that to defray the cost, probably until by the end of the first quarter. That'll give us 3 months of solid data.
I also wonder, politically speaking, if there is a GOP president who comes in next, and presumably the policies and priorities of the executive branch begin to shift over time. What gets baked in from the previous administration versus what could be undone with the power of the pen? That's a favorite game in Washington.
Yeah.
The new president comes in and says, "Aha! Look what I have now." So we'll see.
We will see.
It'll be an amazing conversation. This was an amazing conversation.
They always are.
They always are. When folks say Chris is coming in person, I said, let's do it.
You know what these Hey, folks, what you got to realize, sorry, I got to talk to the
Yeah, go
viewer
for
here.
it. No, I'll
hey,
be over here.
Hey, viewer at home, what you got to realize is every Monday and Thursday over at ActionAlertsPlus.com, JD and I have these very conversations, and I would love for you to join us.
Absolutely. That's a great plug.
Pretty good at that.
Yeah, you got very good at that. That's Chris Versace, Portfolio Manager of Action Alerts Plus. Thanks a lot for taking the time to join us, my friend.
Anytime I'm here.
That is going to do it for The Street today. Stick with TheStreet.com for more on these and all of the major market stories that matter to you. We get to do it again tomorrow. We'll see you then.